Well, I think that there are two types of catalysts to keep an eye on. We have internal catalysts. For us, consistency of operational results is key. Producing what we planned to produce and controlling our costs. It may not sound too sexy or exciting, but that's the secret sauce from which Amerigo generates consistent free cash flow that is being returned to the shareholders. So just doing what we say we're going to do is a very powerful catalyst. Another important catalyst to keep an eye on for Amerigo specifically is reaching debt-free status at the end of this year. That will further boost our already strong free cash flow generation capacity even further. Well, I would speak more than a performance dividend, just a general dividend, because we have the quarterly dividend and the performance dividend. So just in terms of our capital return strategy, or CRS, at the beginning, when we started this in 2021, we had two very distinct teams, team dividend and team buybacks. Over time, the tendencies have softened because we have demonstrated that we can have both. And during the first years, I think it was the first 2 years of our CRS, we were doing 50% buybacks, 50% dividends, and right now, as of today, we're around 60% of the capital has been returned as dividends and 33% as buybacks. So we've been active on both. Institutional investors tend to prefer buybacks because they clearly see it makes sense from an allocation perspective to do these purchases, and also they do not trigger taxes. But for other investors, cash is king, and they love their quarterly dividends checks, which are paid like clockwork on the 20th of each quarter and month. And of course, the performance dividend check has been very, very well received, Scott. Well, you know, that's a complex question. I think that we are seeing more global competition for strategic commodities, no question about that, including copper. Certain commodities are evolving to become chess pieces in power plays that are important to ensure supply chain and infrastructure resilience. There's talk about securing technological leadership and defense security. In the case of copper, what's really interesting to consider is that needing more copper does not mean you will have access to that copper. The fundamental copper story of growing demand and constrained supply is well known. We've talked about it a lot. However, in my view, it's not even sufficient for countries to strategize about copper supply in terms of securing mined copper. The question of who mines copper and where is only part of the picture. There are other very important questions, such as the fact that Western countries have almost no offtake agreements. So in other words, long-term supply agreements are already in place for around 80% of the world's mined copper supply, and that copper is going to the smelters in China. So China, Japan, South Korea are getting that copper, but that copper is not going to reach the US or Europe. So going forward, what we may see is a different approach where countries are required to build new alliances and set up very strategic offtake agreements that secure copper supply regardless of market prices. So this could be a potential catalyst between traditional supply and demand economics, and companies that produce copper in stable jurisdictions can do very well in such a scenario, Scott. The copper demand story has been very consistent. You can look at 50 years of copper consumption data, and you can see that global demand has grown 3 to 4 million tons per decade. This growth has been consistent regardless of economic downturns. Now, the world population has doubled since the 1980s. We now have more than 8 billion people today. This means that copper remains indispensable in developed nations, but here's the question, more important in emerging economies. About 1 billion people have no access to primary electricity, and another 2 billion have only intermittent or unaffordable access. So this is a vast, unavoidable source of copper demand. This is what's being called the copper needed for human development. The higher the rate of development of a country, the higher the installed copper capacity is per person, per capita, and there are numerous low income and middle income countries that are significantly behind in this installed capacity. A recent study I read said that in order to get to the levels of installed capacity the US has, these countries are going to be needing more than 1,000 tons of copper by the year 2100. So this is about 50 years of current annual copper production just on that closing of the gap regarding basic electrification. I'm not talking here about energy transition, just living as usual numbers, and they are quite sobering. So that's a way of seeing where a significant source of demand for copper is going to be coming from. No, it's not doing A or B. Major mining companies have underinvested in exploration and in development for years. Exploration budgets peaked in 2011, and we've never gone back to those levels. New copper mines take decades to achieve commercial production because of the risks of advancing from discovery to production. So the incentive to pursue these investments has not materialized. And as a result, we have a very thin pipeline of additional demand coming in.